What the hell is going on with Ryan Reaves here?
Honestly, I heard you guys talking about it. I mean, it's hard because, the injury set him back. And then is there a spot in the lineup for him? Let's be honest. Like that's the hardest part is, we all thought at the start of the year, like, and listen, I'm not gonna defend the signing, but I knew exactly the spirit of the signing. And Jay, I think you probably agree with it too. It's like you know, when Tree came on, he wanted and he used the word some snot. He wanted some piss and vinegar in his lineup. It's Domi, it's Revo. Even Klingberg was a guy who'd stand up for himself. So, you wanted that to shape around the group that they already have. But it didn't start well for Revo. Obviously, it seemed like every time he was on the ice, whether it was his fault or not, it was in the back of the net. So, that gets a little bit of fanfare. And then he gets the injury, and you come back, and has the team move past him? I don't know. I mean, I'm not behind the scenes there. Is there a spot for him? I think the one thing, and I'll put it back to you guys too, is I don't want him to be disruptive. Like that's where I think if he's I thought that's where you were going, Jay. Is it's all right to come back and want to play, but if you're not going to play every night, you better be a really good teammate. I know that role. I don't know the role of being an enforcer and in that type of fourth line role, but I know the role of being a good backup and not being disruptive. If I have one good game and I'm playing behind Kiprusoff, guess who's playing the next night? It's Kiprusoff. It's not me. So that's the way I look at it. Is I think he's got to find his role back within the team if they allow him to. But it sounds like they may not allow him to if he's on the IR and all of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be, and I mean he needs to be a realist and look at what's going on with the team. I mean, lacking a heavyweight tough guy is not the Leafs' problem with not garnering wins lately. And if to boot, like you said, he's not keeping the puck out of his net and he becomes a liability. And then if you add in the fact maybe he's a distraction and showing, not the best attitude in the situation, it's not something that's going to last long with him. But I think he's smart enough and he's a veteran guy that, whether he said that or not, I don't think it's the big deal. You don't want to blow it out of proportion, but he's probably pretty smart at being the best teammate out there. I mean, I've been in the league an entire year and only played 34 games on a season. Like I know exactly what it's like to get scratched a lot, and you got to be patient and understanding, and you got to see like what's going on with the team. And if I were running it, do I think I'm the answer right here, whether selfishly you want to play or not? I think he can see that, that's probably not going to happen in the immediate future, and he needs to focus on the other things he can do to help off the ice.
And I'll throw in one other thing in there too, is it's not like he's got this year just to deal with. Like he's got 2 more years under contract. So if you want to maximize that money, then be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And what I mean by that is you don't want to be on waivers and going, okay, I'm going to go make it at 36, 37, and 38 years old, grinding on the bus with the Marlies. If you want to make that money, like to me, be a good teammate, fit in, somewhere, be valuable if you're not going to play. That's what I would say to him. And from somebody who's been in that position, Jay, you've been in that position as well, is be a good teammate, wait for your chance, wait for an opportunity and get in there. And in the meantime, he's a big personality. He's a character. I think he's, guys like him. So find a different way to contribute if you're not going to get 8 to 10 minutes on the ice.
That's a very expensive ass cheerleader, but I agree with both of you. What's your sense? What's your feel on this team, Noodles? Because I'll be honest, coming off that California trip to start 2024, I'm like, fuck, they're turning a corner. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, it feels like the sky's falling with this team, unfortunately, right now, and a big week ahead with a home and home here with Winnipeg.
So you identify the strength of schedule too, right? Like San Jose, Anaheim, and you're right, it's a big trip to California. California is not the march of death anymore. What's outside of LA. And I thought the LA game was a real good game. And the reason I'm going to say this is because, what they've been doing now recently is beating the teams that they probably should, but the teams that are either above them or you believe that are in that category, they're not beating those teams. So are you in that category? Are you just a middle of the road team that is going to try and punch up, or are you a team that's near the near in the top or upper echelon that struggles to stay in there and punch down. So that's my biggest challenge with them is, obviously they've got talent that can score, but I think there's a lot of holes in this roster. You're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be your starter? Well, Martin Jones was great for a month, and all of a sudden, like, he's starting to run out of gas a little bit, and that's not his fault. He's been great, and he's, 2 months ago, this guy was playing spottingly with the Marlies. He only played 5 games this year. So, and then, the defensive core injuries, the Klingberg, that situation really hurts. Because now that's a trickle-down effect. You expected Klingberg to be at worst your number 4 defenseman, and that hasn't happened. So now you're asking Liljegren to maybe punch higher. Brody is hit a wall and he's struggling, so he should probably be reset, pushed down, but there's nobody to take that spot. So it's a disjointed effort on the back end outside of Morgan Riley, who's properly slot. Who else? Jake McCabe hasn't played well. I think if Jake McCabe is really solid, he's probably a second pairing guy, but on a deeper team, he might be a third pairing guy just based on, where you are slotted. So I think there's some guys that are being asked to do too much or maybe punch above their weight consistently. So something has to happen there. And Tree's got to sort that out. And then up front, a wave of inconsistency outside of really Matthews and Nylander. Tavares has kind of hit the ditch, but I think John brings something more to the table. He's a complete player. Like, he can go a game without being, scoring a point, but he can contribute because he draws. He can be heavy in the corners. Like, John knows how to play. Mitch has had some pockets of really great play and then some real, disappearing acts, we'll call it, but not really. He's just kind of there and gets points where I'd like to see a little bit more. And then the rest of the roster is a crapshoot. What are you going to get from Max Domi? What are you getting from Bertuzzi? What are you getting from Yarncroke? Matthew Nyes is a kid, but he's still learning. All of a sudden, Pontus Holmberg, you wake up and this guy's on the top line. Like, what the hell's that? And then, back down to the 4th line. And then if he disappears, people are like, all right, Bobby McCann's in there. Like, there's no consistency of like, I look at Winnipeg's roster. I'm now looking at Edmonton's roster. Like, it seems to be more set and just with a little bit of tweaking. Night in and night out, I don't know what we're getting from certain players with the Maple Leafs. So the inconsistency, I think, is a big concern for me.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It seems like these guys don't know who they are, what they're supposed to play like, what role is every guy. Like you say, a guy's on a 4th line, he's on the Marlies, he's on the 1st line. Nothing stays consistently. I just think that Sheldon Keefe doesn't really have an MO on what the identity of this team is supposed to be. And for that reason, you're getting all kinds of inconsistencies. But I wanted to pick your brain on goaltending a little bit. We're kind of getting prepped for, Joseph Woll at some point here make his return from that ankle injury. Everything we've heard about this guy in his past has been that he is very high pedigree, very high stock, very capable, got a really good head on his shoulders. What do you think is the expectations for him from coming back from this kind of lengthy injury time away from the game, and how much do you think he can help or hurt the team when that does happen?
Well, I think he can help. I think the biggest concern for him is jumping on a moving train. I just watched Shane Pinto play the other night in Ottawa. He missed 41 games. And, the pace of the game, the spacing, getting into a groove, it's going to be really hard. And Joseph Woll, as a player, you can hide a little bit on the ice. As a goalie, you can't. There's no hiding. You either make the save or you don't. So, and it'll be a lot of pressure for him to come back. And is he going to be the guy? Is he going to be the support guy to Samsonov? He's going to be the support guy to Martin Jones. Like, what is his role coming back? Because, yes, before the injury, there was some separation. He was getting some important games and playing well. But let's not, forget that it's not like he has 400 games of experience to rely on. Like, we haven't seen a patch where he's struggled. We haven't seen a patch where there's been some inconsistency because he's just learning the league. So I would argue, Tree has to find out in his mind, who does he trust the most? And this is heading up to March 8th. And then after March 8th, you'd say, who's starting my first playoff game? And right now people say, well, Joseph Woll. Well, he started some last year in the playoffs, but is he your guy? And if he's not your guy because of injuries and inconsistencies, who's the guy that you're going to trust next? So I think there's a lot of question marks still to be answered. I laid out the defense, I laid out the forwards, but I still think there's a lot of decisions to be made within that scope of the three goaltenders as to who do you trust most, who do you believe has the biggest ceiling, and then who's going to be here at the end of the year. And let's be honest, if Martin Jones gets put on waivers, he might get plucked by one of these other teams. So there's a lot of questions to be answered here before March 8th and after March 8th.
Noodles, I don't remember a time where we weren't talking about Toronto's goaltending. Like, man, I'm just so annoyed and tired of the conversation. Like, I'm at a point where it's like, if you got to go get New Saros or somebody like that, you go out and make the move. I just can't do this anymore. Like, I just think for a team that thinks they're a legitimate Stanley Cup contender, there are just way too many question marks. Or do you think they're believing now in like the Aiden Hill model where it's like this guy comes out of nowhere, but then last time I checked, you have nowhere close to the defensive structure that a Vegas has, right?
You just nailed it right there. Vegas won the cup with two Norris defensemen in Pietrangelo and Theodore. Like, God love Morgan Riley. I think he's always, a cusp of a 1A, whatever you want to. I love the player. I love the person. And that is not the defensive structure of a team that just buttons it down. If anything, they show flashes of it. Hey, we're really dialed in. This year, it hasn't been the case consistently, giving up breakaways, giving up too many chances. Their D get, forced. There's a lot of pressure on their D, the D to go back and get it. So you're right. The Aiden Hill model worked for Vegas because Vegas played that way. And yes, Jack Eichel made $10 million, but everybody else fell into line. And that fourth line could have been arguably the best fourth line in hockey at that point. When you've got guys that can lean on you physically and push you out of a game. So I if it's a copycat league, then I would say, okay, go with the Aiden Hill model, but find me two Norris caliber defensemen that can move the puck then. And that's, go copy that. And that's easier said. Oh, and by the way, they had one double digit, and Jack Eichel making 10 million, not 3 + 1 coming. So, it's that formula is not going to work with the Leafs. So you're right. If UC Saros is available, if Jacob Markstrom's available, or you go a step down into Mackenzie Blackwood or into, Dan Vladar, guys like that, have at it. But again, they come at a cost. Like there's, Craig Conroy's not putting up his hand and go, Tree, I worked with you, so I'm going to give you these players for free, and I'll eat a bunch of salary to make it work in your structure. I think Mike Greer probably has lots of offers on Mackenzie Blackwood. I like him as a goaltender. Unfortunately, he's been in really bad situations in Jersey and now in San Jose. So we don't know what he is. We really don't know what he is as a goalie on a good team because he's never been able to do that. So lots of questions to be asked. And yes, if you could get UC Saros, I would do that in a heartbeat. But it's costing you a hell of a player to go the other way because they're not just going to give him away for a second rounder and eat half of his salary.
So that's your take then. It's goaltender would be the most preferred method of fixing this team over the defensemen and relying on what they have between the pipes, eh?
No, I would say this, and Jay, it's not that. It's just it comes back to Nick's point. Is like I don't think this is one move away. I think there's a step ladder of moves to be made, and Tree has to figure out how to fit all these pieces within structure and the cap system. So if you believe that Joseph Wall can do it, then you don't tinker with the goalies. You just make sure you've got health and the three that you're able to keep. Then you look at the D and you go, okay, am I going to use Klingberg's money? Am I going to go get Tanev? Am I going to go get Sean Walker? Guys like that. It's going to cost you, but it may not cost you a king's ransom. Nick Robertson is playing a lot recently. Like maybe he's a guy that they're building some stock up, and he might be a trade piece to a team that is younger and wants a live body and doesn't need a draft pick. I'm trying to remember what team has 22 draft picks in the next 3 years. I just did their game the other day. I've been doing so many games, but they're going to move players out. They want live bodies now. They're like, to hell with the draft picks. We've got enough of those. We need live bodies. So if you're talking about live bodies, maybe it is the, Robertsons, guys like that. It's not going to be Matthew Nice, but, maybe it's a kid that you covet in the minors or in the in junior. I know Fraser Minton and Cowan, Easton Cowan might be off limits, but to get one of these players to put you over the top, it might cost you something like that.
Was it Chicago you're thinking about?
No, I didn't do Chicago. I think it was Montreal, maybe.
Yeah, maybe them, because I know they have a lot of picks they've stockpiled. Just a couple more, we'll let you go. I think the thing here is like the players have to prove their worth. Like I talked about it off the top of the podcast, where it's like they have 18 games remaining between now and March 8th, the trade deadline. And I think it's up to the players to prove their worth. Like I think if they go out there and show they're a legitimate contender, I think you're tree and you help them out. But as things situate right now, man, they got 2 games remaining before the All-Star break, the bye week. I just don't think they're in a position to add, because I'm not sure how the brain trust feels about them right now.
Well, that's the biggest thing too, is does the brain trust think this team's a cup contender, or do they think they're a team that can make the playoffs and try and go on a run? Because I think there's a difference. And are you going to spend, throw prospects and picks out the window to do that? Kyle's done that in past years, and they've got one playoff win to show for that. And now the cupboards are a lot more bare. So I think they have to have come to Jesus. I guess it might be the right verbiage, where it's like, okay, what are we as a team? Do we give these guys the resources? Do we give them extra players at the deadline, or say, go and prove me wrong. Go do this with you, who you have in the room, who we put together, and I'm going to tinker at the deadline. So those are decisions to be made too, where if you believe you've got the framework of, Joseph Wall, Morgan Riley, TJ Brody, and then the 4 up top, center and right side, and then you ask the players around them to play very well, then you go at it. You hope that you can catch lightning in a bottle, and Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and William Nylander deliver you what we've seen, for example, McDavid and Draisaitl. Like those guys, if you look at the way they play in the playoffs, like they find another level. Now their teams haven't had the success, but they've won rounds and they've competed like hell. And to me, that's where I'd like to see this group find another level, if you believe that they can get it done.
Who starts Wednesday against Winnipeg, Noodles?
We had a pretty good spirited debate yesterday. I think it's going to be Samsonov. Like, I think you come back with Samsonov and see if he can get into a groove. And I don't disagree, Hayes said this to me, was if you start Jones, it really says what you think of Samsonov and where the trust level is. So it's kind of I thought they would split them, but, I would come back with Samsonov. His last 2 games, I know he lost against Detroit. I didn't love, the game-winning goal against Detroit, but I thought he played very well. And I thought he played solid in Seattle the other night. He looked comfortable. Like when I look at goalies, I want to see if they're comfortable, because you're going to make saves, you're going to give up goals, all of that. But there's a level you can, like I watch goaltenders, some of them wear it. That you can actually see them wear goals against, and they shrink in the net, and you can tell that they're frustrated. Other goalies, they play and they don't get ruffled. You could see Samsonov wear the goals against. Last game, I thought he looked really composed. I thought against Detroit, he looked composed. So I'd like to see him get into a groove. So long answer to your question. I think it's Samsonov, but nothing surprises me these days. Who knows?
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.